Right now, you're listening to the Azim Digital Asks podcast, the podcast where I, Azim, talk to some of the top marketers in the industry, find out everything about them, how they got to where they are today, and more importantly, sharing some really useful marketing tips that will help everybody listening to this become better marketers. Stay tuned for another great episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Azim Digital Asks podcast. Super excited to bring you my guest today. Bit of a different direction. I'm really excited and glad that she said yes to coming on the show. She's an award-winning journalist and the assistant news editor for metro.co.uk. And she also helps young people get into journalism through the Llama, Kettle Mag and Career Camel. The wonderful Sian Elvin. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's all right. It's just the classic lockdown syndrome. I'm sure everyone's feeling it at the moment. It's quite fun to do this, actually.
Awesome. Look, I'm really excited to get you on. You're going to share loads of wisdom and help lots of people be able to get into your inbox and get read, which is probably a bad thing for you, but great for the listeners.
That's great for all of us.
But before we get started, as always, random question, random icebreaker. I want to know about your most random lockdown purchase.
Well, actually, I've kind of stolen this off my flatmate, but he decided last week that it would be a great idea to go on the Hotel Chocolat website, and they're selling off all their chocolate at the moment, their Christmas chocolate, because it's all going to go off. So he bought about £100 worth of chocolate, but for about 30 quid or something. So we've just been eating chocolate all week, and actually, as great as it is, I'm kind of sick of chocolate, and I feel like I'm going to go for 5 extra runs now as a result.
Immediately after this recording, I am going to jump on their website now. So thanks for that.
I hope for your sake it's all gone.
Awesome. Look, very glad to have you on the show. For those that don't know who you are, would you like to share a little bit more about yourself, more of an intro to yourself?
Yes, sure. So yes, as Azim said, I'm a journalist. Over the years, I've worked in local, national, and student publications. I've worked across online and print. I've worked in news and lifestyle as well. So I'm hoping that I'm not just talking on here about my role now. I'm just talking about my role as a journalist in general. So everything I sort of say is very much a sort of personal perspective from a sort of random journalist, hopefully. So I should give you a bit of an overview, but maybe not specifics to exactly the kind of journalist you're looking to target. But yeah, so I started out at the Seven Oaks Chronicle, actually, which is a newspaper in Kent. And since then, I've worked at bigger local websites, sort of mainly working online. Kent Live, a website called My London, and as mentioned, I'm now at Metro Online. And yeah, I've sort of worked through across a lot of different platforms and with a lot of different people. So I kind of feel like I've seen a lot of different things in terms of pitches and emails I've had in my inbox. So yeah, it'd be great to kind of share some of the things that I've experienced anyway. I'm guessing that's what you want to hear.
Absolutely, yes. And I forgot to mention to the listeners that you did an absolutely awesome talk at BrightonSEO last year. And I'm going to steal, no, you're welcome. And I'm going to steal what you've just said. So just to be clear, you said local, national, and student press.
Yes.
So triple threat is how
Yeah.
I'm going to sell this episode.
Wow.
So let's find out a little bit more about you and your career first before we dig into those sort of digital PR type questions. So
Sure.
when did you realize that you were going to get into this career? What point did you realize, this is the career for me?
I actually love this question because it's kind of got two parts to it, really. So when I was younger, I was very lucky in that me and my family could always sit around the table and have dinner together. Because my dad used to be out at work all day. I didn't used to see him until the evening, so we always used to sit around and watch the 6 o'clock news. So I sort of grew up on watching the news and being embedded in it, really. And it was really nice that we could all sort of sit and we'd have debates and we'd have discussions, and it sort of became part of my daily life and my daily routine, really. So news has sort of always been in the and journalism really has always been in the background of sort of my everyday life. Then when I went to university, I did English literature, so I was doing lots of reading, and I got involved with my student paper. So I went to the University of Warwick, and I wrote for my student paper called The Boar. Shout out if any of you know what The Boar is, because it's got a strange name. Um, I mean, don't ask me why, because I don't know. Um, but yeah, so I used to write for that, and then it came to a sort of point in my second year or the end of my first year that I was choosing to spend my time writing the student newspaper rather than writing the essay that really needed to be done for the next day. So when I was doing that, I thought, you know what? I feel like probably my life lies in writing the news rather than reading books all the time. And that's when I kind of decided that I was going to give the journalism thing a real go. And I guess here I am now.
So, knowing what you know now and with all the experience that you've got, imagine that you could start all over again, but with armed with all of that knowledge. So, if you could go back to when you first started your career, what advice do you think that you would give to yourself?
Oh, definitely grow that thick skin and grow it as I mean, I've always had quite a thick skin anyway, but I think just grow it as quickly as possible because however thick you grow your skin, you still can't sort of be prepared for the amount of stuff that you're going to be exposed to online. And I don't even necessarily mean like bad stuff all the time. I just mean kind of anything really. I think in this career, I never realized how many different emotions I'd experience really. Writing the news is all sorts of, you know, there's lows, but there's also, highs, and there's things that will like make you really emotional in a happy way. So I think, yeah, just getting prepared for the kind of roller coaster of emotion that's journalism. I wouldn't change a thing, but I just think you have to be prepared for all the comments and all of raw life, really, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. And I should have mentioned earlier, actually, that a lot of the people that I've spoken to on the podcast before, mainly marketers,
Hmm.
typically all did journalism degrees, including myself. I really wanted to be a journalist, but as a stereotypical male, I wanted to be a sports journalist so I could watch free football every weekend and get paid for it. Never happened, unfortunately. But we move on. This is an episode about about you, not about me. I wanted to touch on that then, especially the digital PR aspect of it and picking up on some things that you shared from your great conference talk. So, what can digital PRs, or in fact, anyone who's pitching to you, what can they do to make your life easier as a journalist?
Yeah, I think kind of moving a little bit from what I was saying, really, I think it's just about having a kind of understanding of how journalists work and, how not just like my job personally, but how journalists work in general and just, like just spending a little bit of time, even just, listening to things like this. What a great advert for your podcast. But, even just, if you know anyone who's a journalist, just reaching out to them and finding a bit more out about their job. For example, mine, as I've mentioned, I'm working in news at the moment. So it's really fast paced. And it can be very intense at times, but it's particularly relevant at the moment. I didn't want to make this all pandemic talk, but I think it is kind of relevant to explain that at the moment. I'm sure a lot of PRs are probably finding it's difficult for them to land stories because we're just constantly thrown a barrage of having to report on what the government is saying all the time, um, which is really important. And obviously, it's not the same for all journalists. There will be journalists that don't work in news and do more lifestyle content. There'll be more journalists that are looking for more local content that isn't just about coronavirus. But I still think that journalists, now more than ever, the amount of information that's thrown at us all the time, we have less and less time because we're trying to report on more. And we have, more people. My inbox, I mean, maybe part of it is because I've moved to nationals, but my inbox every year gets bigger and bigger, and I get more and more people contacting me. So that's more and more like time, or less and less time, I should say, to reply to people in my own inbox all the time. More and more stories to write. It's just a kind of like time thing, really. So I think just kind of find out about, as I said, how journalists work, what their day's like, how they pitch to people, particularly for, I don't want to go into the specifics of me personally because I'm not reflective of every journalist ever, but try and find out more about, if you're pitching to a niche magazine or, a local paper, find out about how they work. And I think that would just really help you kind of slot into their mindset and what they're looking for, I suppose. And I guess we'll touch on that a bit more later anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm not someone that does digital PR, but even I know that the sort of scattergun approach will just sort of fall flat because you can see it a mile off. But like you
Mm,
said, we'll pick on that later on. I am quite keen to learn from you. So imagine somebody's just starting out in the industry, for example, or just in
mm.
general. What's the biggest mistake that you see that people make when they're pitching to you?
Yeah, and I think this kind of it kind of touches on what I said a little bit just now. It's that I at the moment, so as I mentioned, I'm working news, so I often get a lot of irrelevant pitches. And actually, I was talking to some colleagues earlier, and I mentioned I mentioned I was coming on here, and they all said that like the number one problem for them is that they get loads of irrelevant pitches that even if they're brilliant, you might have a really really brilliant lifestyle story or something like that, but we cover news, so it doesn't fit into our section. Therefore, we're just not going to use it. Um, so I'd say kind of the way to correct that is just to do a bit of, and I understand that people have just mailing lists that they whiz stuff out on, but maybe making those a bit more specific and just having a research of the people that you're pitching to. Um, and yeah, just make sure you're nailing the right section, the right area if you're pitching to a local, for example. um, as I've mentioned, I've worked at local newspapers, so I used to have more of a patch. So the issue I used to have there is that people used to pitch me stuff that was about the country as a whole, and obviously I'm looking at a more local perspective there. And then now I kind of get the opposite, where people are pitching me lots of local stuff, and it's not quite as wide or as national as I'd like it to be. So I think it kind of works both ways, and I think definitely people just need to just do a little bit of a research in the kind of people and sections and just refining it a little bit more. Really, I think maybe there's more success in firing, not firing off to hundreds and hundreds of journalists. It's about maybe refining your list and pitching it to the ones that you think it's actually got a decent chance of landing, rather than just pitching and hoping for the best.
Love that answer. Thank you very much for sharing that. And you've made me think of a question that I absolutely haven't prepared you for, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So typically, the advice, well, some of the advice I should say that new digital PRs get is to try and build a relationship with journalists.
Mm.
What's the best way that you would advise somebody to build a relationship with yourself, for example?
I think this one's quite difficult actually, because I think, as I sort of mentioned, we have less and less time now, and I think it's about I don't know, instead of sort of just trying to build a relationship just randomly, because I think it kind of has to be, when you build any kind of relationship, whether it's, a professional or a personal relationship, usually you build them off things that you've got in common, don't you? Or something like that. And I think in terms of a professional relationship like this, I think it's just in the sense that if you if you've landed a really good story with them, and you've landed a story that's done them really good figures or has got a really good response, I think that's a really good way of starting to build that, because then I think I've got relationships with a few PRs because I know that I can go to them about certain subjects and they've really helped me out before. So I think it's about building it in a more natural way. If you land a story, you can be like, yeah, if you want more on this, and I can provide you more on this, and this is the other stuff that we do, and then they kind of know that they can rely on you. But when you've got obviously loads of people pitching to you all the time, it takes a while for you to like learn who are the people that you can rely on and go back to, really quickly for comments, for example, because sometimes you might go to somebody and you want a comment and they can't provide it to you fast enough or something like that, and then you might not necessarily rely on them. So I think it's just about this, building up a kind of natural rapport, and rather than just randomly being like, hi, how are you, kind of stuff. I think it's more about building it naturally. And obviously Twitter I think can be helpful for that, just in terms of like, just connecting on, again, as I mentioned, things that you have in common really. So it's more of a sort of, yeah, natural thing.
Love that. Again, another great answer. And one, like I said, I didn't prepare you for. So 10 out of 10. You did very well there. Pass marks. Let's talk cringe, right? Or
Mm.
failures, right? Are you able to share like some of the biggest like failures or like cringe moments that you've had in your inbox?
Love a cringe. I don't know if you saw this actually, because it went a bit big on Twitter a few weeks ago. I think it was just before Christmas. Somebody started off their pitch to me with a poem. So it wasn't even, it wasn't they weren't pitching me a poem to publish. Like, they started off their pitch before sending me the story with a poem. So as you can imagine, that had an interesting response. And I put it on Twitter, and everyone had lots of varying opinions about it. And I think kind of the thing maybe to say with this, because I don't I don't want to deter people from taking risks in order to try and get a pitch. I think it's maybe about thinking about how things can land, really. And I think those sort of cringiest moments come from when someone's maybe like clicked send before really thinking about it. Um, and I think, it's just thinking, if I got sent that, how would I react? Or how would, I don't know, my mum react? Or how would my friend react? It's just thinking about, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
um, yeah, I could tell you were holding back laughing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think, just when you're taking a risk like that, I just think it's about maybe thinking about how it could land, in all scenarios. So I think, that was maybe one of the more embarrassing moments. But other things I've had happen is, I think, things that are, probably inexcusable, really, like getting the name of a publication wrong, because you've copied and pasted it from somewhere, or getting someone's name wrong. That's happened to me quite a few times. Which I think that, there's probably no excuse for that. You can't necessarily bash someone for maybe trying to be creative, but I think with something like getting names wrong, that's definitely a no-no. But yeah, over the kind of, the sharing, the cringe moments, and the embarrassments. I know, obviously, we all do like a laugh. I don't want to, offend or upset anyone by mentioning sort of, embarrassing things. But I also like to think that, if we can use this, and the kind of discussion, that's why I was, keen to come on here, Azim, because it's about having a constructive conversation, I suppose, just to
Yeah.
help improve the industry, really. And obviously, I think that these two industries, they're, really, they're kind of, two sides of the same coin in a way. And I think if we can improve it overall, then it improves it for all of us, because you guys can land more stories, and we can get more stories that are more appropriate for us, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more about the two industries going hand in hand. Great point. Completely agree. Wanted to ask you then, what do you think, or what are your thoughts on clickbait pitches?
mm, yeah, I like this question, actually, because I was sort of having a think about what clickbait means, and I did actually look up a definition of clickbait. So clickbait is actually a text that's designed to attract attention and entice users to follow that link and read, view, or listen to the online content, with a defining characteristic of being deceptive, typically sensationalized or misleading. And I think that's kind of the key thing here, really, with clickbait, because people like to use the kind of term clickbait to just say, oh, something that makes you click on it. But I think clickbait's a bit more like, it's that being given an expectation of something that's going to be in this case, in the email that you've sent me. And then you click onto it, and then you're like, oh, that's actually not what it was at all. It was something completely different. So I guess my point with that is going to be, is that if you're going to send me like an email, which, is something quite dramatic and makes me click on it, then you've absolutely got to deliver on that. And I think you've got to think about, if you were in my shoes, and um, you clicked on an email, and you were disappointed by its contents, then I'm going to, feel the same thing if you send me if you send me something that's clickbaity. So I think, like, obviously, if it's something really dramatic and the content of your email delivers, then that's super cool. And actually, that's exactly what you want, something that's really exciting and will grab me. Perfect. But only if, as I said, it kind of delivers on that. So yeah, and also, you don't want to become that boy who cries wolf, I think, either, in that way, that if you keep giving me these kind of like little tidbits that I look at, and I'm like, oh no, it's not that, then in future I might not look at an email. We do, obviously, as I mentioned, I get loads of emails all the time, but I do recognize certain, agencies or companies or names sometimes that crop up in my inbox regularly, and then I might be like, oh, that person's clickbaited me before, I won't look at this one. And then that might be your one golden campaign that you think's amazing, and then I've deliberately not looked at it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question in a roundabout
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So, taking what you've just said there,
Mm.
this email lands in your inbox, and this is the subject line. This is all it says. The 6 surprising exercises that you shouldn't be doing in the gym. What's your reaction?
What am I doing wrong in the gym? It's like, yeah, no, but on a sort of serious note, as I said, that's what I wanted to deliver on though. And if I open it and it says something, it says something completely crazy, like, oh, I don't know, you shouldn't be, walking around the gym, or I don't know, I can't think of any examples really, but you want it to actually deliver. If there are particular exercises that I don't know could be, really damaging to like your health or something, or you might pull a muscle, you might really injure yourself doing these particular exercises in a particular way, and I read that, then that's absolutely fine. But on a completely separate point away from like the clickbait thing, if that email landed in my inbox, the first thing I would think is, well, this doesn't belong in my section because I cover news. Um, so it wouldn't be something that I would, it wouldn't be something that I would cover. And again, something else to maybe consider at the moment is that gyms aren't open, as we all know, because I'd love to go back to the gym.
Snap.
Well, no, it's rubbish, isn't it? But yeah, so I wouldn't, even if I was going to cover that kind of content, I probably wouldn't publish that at the moment because people aren't going to the gym, so they're probably not going to care. And actually, it'll probably remind them that they're not going to the gym, and then they'd be sad about it. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably what I'd say about that one. So I think there's a few different, like when you send these things, there's a few, different things to think about when, not just the clickbait thing. You've got to be able to deliver if you have a dramatic headline, but then you've got to think about the other context around what you're pitching to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to follow on from that very quickly. So speaking of dramatic headlines, I won't give you any specific example, but you get a dramatic subject line in your inbox. You click on it, you open the email, and it's got everything you want in there, every type of asset you want, even quotes, images, all in a Dropbox, for example.
Yeah.
How do you react?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. That's brilliant. That's exactly what I want. And that also, if you've given me a really good story that delivers in every way, say it's got all the images and everything like that. Dropbox really easy to access, so that's great. And usually, as far as I know, Dropbox links don't expire either, do they? So that's the only thing. Sometimes you might get a WeTransfer that's expired, which can be a bit frustrating. But yeah, if it's got everything there, then that's great. And then that also, that comes in as part of sort of what you said before about the building a relationship as well, because now I know if you've delivered that to me, then you'll deliver again. So that's the kind of perfect relationship builder as well.
Absolutely. This has been brilliant so far, and sadly, we are coming to the end. But before you go, I wanted to ask you what let's say three, what three things do you want people listening to this episode to take away?
Yeah, I think sort of leading on from what I was saying about you're saying about the subject lines and the kind of clickbait thing, and what I said at the beginning about how, learn about how a journalist works. I think one of the sort of main things that you need to do is kind of just like tune in with if you're pitching to news journalists, you want the news cycle, or tune into the kind of like trend cycle of whatever kind of environment your journalist is working in. So obviously, if they work in entertainment, you want to tune into the celebrities and what celebrities are doing. If you're doing something under lifestyle, you want to look at what the latest lifestyle trends are and what's going on there. If you're working in news, you want to tune into the news cycle and you want to look at for example, at the moment particularly, but all the time anyway, we're looking at politics and how politics is working. So you kind of want to look at what's going on in Parliament that day. Are there any sort of like big court cases going on? Because I think something else which is really important, which we haven't actually gone into on this podcast yet, is just about pitching at the right time. You might have an absolutely amazing story, but if you pitch it to me in the middle of a government press conference, then I'm absolutely not going to see it. And then by the time I get to my inbox the next morning, it'd be so cluttered up with other things that I'll have completely missed it. So I think it's really important just to like tune in with that cycle or whatever's going on. So, if you can see that a celebrity's made a big announcement that they're pregnant or something like that, then that's probably not the best time to pitch to the entertainment desk because they're going to be really busy with that story. Or if some massive breaking news stories happen, like, for example, the Capitol riots the other week, you need to make sure that you're not, getting your story lost in that kind of news cycle, really. So I think that's probably the first thing that I'd say. Um, and then also just being objective, really, and like I sort of mentioned with the cringe moments, just think about try it. It's difficult, and I think maybe you can't always do it with yourself in terms of stepping out of the box. And it's really difficult to evaluate your own work, but I think sometimes maybe get a colleague to read over or something and just look at your pitch, try and look at it objectively and think, is this actually, newsworthy or interesting or exciting, or does it land the way I want to? If ultimately, and I think this as well, just in journalism, if I'm writing a story and it makes me bored, then it's probably not the right story. It should be, interesting or informative or deliver the right kind of purpose that I'm trying to achieve with writing the story. So if your own pitch bores you, don't pitch it, ditch it, redo it. Think about a different way you can write it. Think about a different way you can sell it. Think about, as I said, the environment that you're pitching it in. Maybe might it wait until tomorrow and do better, or next week maybe, or something like that. And I think try and don't be afraid to be critical of yourself as well. Just think about it and talk to your colleagues and think about how you can make it better. And I think probably the last thing is just as I sort of mentioned about the busy thing. This is something I've particularly found recently with the news going absolutely crazy. Um, and in terms of going to work on nationals as well, like your emails kind of spiral out of control. So I think don't be really offended if we don't get back to you, because it's so difficult to like reply to people and keep on top of my emails. And I do try to sometimes, but it's not always possible. But like honestly, if you've got a really good story or a really good pitch, then I can't necessarily speak for everybody else, but I do go through all my emails, so I do see them. So if I've not contacted you, that probably means it's not for us. I haven't got time, necessarily to reply to everybody and say that it's not for us. But even if it maybe the picture's a little bit off, but I want it, then I will tell you what more I kind of need. So if you chase me multiple times and I don't get back to you, it's just because I have 100 other people doing the same thing. And also just, yeah, they're not doing the multiple, I think, one follow up is fine, but maybe not following up loads and loads and loads because, as I said, if it's a good story, then, we will want it. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's three. Is that three? Maybe it was five.
Yeah, absolutely. Disappointed that you didn't say fake it till you make it, but I'll let you off.
It's because I've definitely said that before.
What a brilliant way to end the episode. Some really useful tips there and all the way throughout the episode. Firstly, thank you very much before we get to the closing part. I
You're
think this
so
has been
welcome.
really, really insightful. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you or follow you on socials, what's the best way, or what's the best way for someone to do that?
Yeah, I think Twitter is probably the best way to get in touch with me. I'm at Sian Elvin, so quite easy. You can find me by searching. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn and all that, but I think Twitter's the best thing. I sort of use that every day. So it's the best way of contacting me. But if you do have a press release or something, then please you can just look on the Metro website. My email address is very public. I don't like it when people send me whole press releases on Twitter, which has been known. But just for chatting, following, seeing what I'm doing. My Twitter account is absolutely perfect. So it would be really awesome to talk to some of you. As I sort of said, it's all about us, working together to make these industries better and get better stuff out there, I suppose. So, I'm all up for these kinds of conversations and, yeah, hopefully getting some good stories. But yeah, so if you've got a great story, then please do tweet me, definitely.
Absolutely. Look, thanks very much, Sean, for being a brilliant guest. I've
Thanks for
certainly
having
learned a
me.
lot, and I think the listeners definitely will too. And I didn't prepare you for this, so I'm very interested to see what your answer is. I always let my guests have the very last word on the podcast, so this is open forum within reason,
Yeah, actually.
and end and end your own episode. So the final word on your episode goes
Oh,
to you.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure here, though. I feel there's quite a lot of pressure to decide what the final word's going to be. Well, I feel like maybe then we should try and wrap it up in the same way we started, so we come full circle. And in a minute, I'm going to go and eat loads of chocolate.
So that was another great episode in the bag. I'm really enjoying hearing from some brilliant people in this industry. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow me on Spotify. Please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you are using. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and hopefully see you for the next episode.